Homeschool parents, this is a message for you. As a homeschooler, I know you work hard for us. You have many different things to manage.
Our Thinking, Feeling, Willing program is your roadmap to a successful Waldorf homeschool journey. Gain the confidence you need to be the teacher your child wants and transform your homeschool experience. Homeschooling with Waldorf Essentials is one like no other. You not only have curriculum options, you can also add our Thinking, Feeling, Willing program onto your curriculum. What's in the Thinking, Feeling, Willing program? Rhythm, inner work, temperament, the Waldorf curriculum, learning and strengthening your skills in music, circle time, form drawing, handwork, painting, drawing, modeling, festivals, reading, writing, spelling, eurythmy and movement, and our bonus content. Something else you'll get when you join Waldorf Essentials that you will not find anywhere else is the community, and we all need that as homeschoolers.
This is your invitation to fill your cup. We know you're rooting for us. We are rooting for you too.
Welcome to this week's podcast. I am here with two of my very best friends in the whole world, Annie and Laura, and we are going to talk to you today about our choices for middle school and high school, sort of how we, got to this space and just sort of this homeschool journey, because I feel like often families get to these middle grades and then they start thinking about high school and they get afraid. And we don't want you to be afraid. We want you to be relaxed and not stressing so much and to really just be able to look at your child. So I'm going to introduce them both and let them tell you where you can find them online. They both have great Instagram accounts and you're welcome to follow them. We'll also put it in the show notes so that you have access to them there. And then they're going to talk a little bit about their homeschool path. And then we'll just talk together about sort of what we've all done and where we feel like we're going from here. So let's start with Miss Annie. Annie, the child is the curriculum. I know your account way before I knew you.
Yeah, my name is Annie and Annie Hawes, and I have been really drawn to Waldorf over the years, and it just deepens through the years. And I have three, so I have a 22-year-old, and I have a 16-year-old, and I have an 11-year-old, and so I have one that is out of homeschooling now, and so I've gotten one through, so that feels
Always
like
feels better. Like, whoo, I did one. I can do another.
that means that, yeah, a little more confidence when you have when you still haven't had one all the way through. You might be like a little more weary, like, can I actually do this? And I guess my message would be to people, and as always, yes, you can do it. Yes, they do make it. No, you won't fail. Because they chose you, and that's kind of what we say in Waldorf, is that they choose us, so we're their ushers, and I'm happy to usher these three through. And yeah, and I started the child as the curriculum because I was trying to find a way to meet my specific child's needs, and I wanted to do that in the best way I could, and then help other people do the same. Really, mainly made it for confidence. I was like, well, if I can do this, other people can do this. And I really wanted them to know that it's not impossible, because I just kept hearing over and over this message of, well, I don't really think I can do that. Like, that's for you, or, you really can't do it. And I just felt like that's not the reason someone should not do it. That it was a confidence issue mainly. So that's why I wanted to help. I wanted to help in whatever way that I could help.
No,
So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Very good. How about you, Miss Laura? Tell us a little bit about you.
So I'm Lara, and I have one child. She is almost 14, and I never really planned to homeschool. I had always planned before I had children to do Waldorf. I say always, but I had been introduced to it when I was 18. And I had watched these children graduate out of a Waldorf high school. And I was like, that's what I want for my child. But homeschooling was never on the radar. So I had actually, without intentionally realizing it, I had helped create a Waldorf preschool when we lived on the Central Coast of California. And then I, again, still didn't think this was going to be a full-time thing. So we moved to an area for a Waldorf school. My daughter did 1 year of kindergarten. And then my husband got offered a job somewhere else for 6 months, and we decided to go with him. And it was there that I found a homeschool community. And I realized that this was actually what I wanted to be doing. So every step of the way, it has been, I'm going to do this year. And the more my confidence grew, the more I was like, oh yeah, I can do the next year. And now it's not even a thought process. It's just, this is what I'm doing. So it's just been a journey. And yeah, I am happy to help people along the way, because I definitely think for me, it was a confidence issue.
Totally.
Didn't have that confidence until I'd done a few years. And then I was like, okay.
No, that's great. I think that's great. Annie, you started your kids at a Waldorf school, right?
Well, I started homeschooling first, but I had only done a year of homeschooling first. And that's because we didn't live near a Waldorf school. And that was my first time trying this out. My son was in sixth grade. So sixth grade is the first year I taught. So if I can start with knowing
Wow.
very little in sixth grade,
Oh. Mhm.
I guess, I guess I didn't know what I didn't know. The reason that I had so much confidence was just out of love. I was like, that is what I want. And I
Right.
just was so excited that I didn't think about whether or not I could do it. I was just excited. And I guess I actually probably, when I went to a Waldorf school the next year, I think I already lost my confidence once I got to Waldorf school. It's like, oh, okay, maybe I should be doing things like this even more. And then I was kind of like, wow, maybe I did get in over my head, but I don't know. I still kept my enthusiasm, and I just absorbed as much as I could from the school. But then while I was at the school, like we were there for 3.5 years. I learned so much at the school. I did every workshop. I over volunteered, probably to the point of exhaustion at the school. I volunteered at the farm. I did photography. I was like, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it, so that I could just absorb all of this and learn.
Right.
But then I realized the longer I was there that I was like sort of maybe a little bit jealous of the teachers. So I was like, I was just dropping them off, and I had a toddler, and I was like, well, but I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave camp. I want to go, and I want to teach. And I wanted to do that, but I realized I didn't want to. They're like, well, one of the teachers said you should do teacher training because they offered it there, and I was like, but then I have to deal with other people's parents. And I didn't want to teach a whole classroom, I guess.
Right.
I wanted to teach my children. And so
Mhm.
then it kind of dawned on me, like, I kind of want to return now that I've learned all this. Like, it was kind of like a university, right? For me to be at the Waldorf School, it was like a college for me. And then
Absolutely.
and then I felt like, okay, I need to graduate, and I want to go do this on my own. And my husband also relocated, like Lara, like he had a different job, and it was further away. And so I said, let me just, and then at the very same time, just, this is how the universe works, is the things were crumbling apart, as far as just not for the school itself, but for my specific children. One of them, their teacher left. They're supposed to be with their teacher for 8 years, but that teacher was leaving. And the high school really wasn't what was a good fit for my son. So I just said, let me bring all of my children back home. And we moved an hour away. I still had the school nearby as kind of a support. I still stayed in touch with the anthroposophical branch and still went to branch things. But I started like being a Waldorf teacher because that was what I felt like was my calling. I just want to do this for my own children and not necessarily be a Waldorf teacher in a school. And so it really was a calling, and all the outer circumstances that happened really pushed me into doing that. And yeah, then I had to build that confidence. So it happened over time.
I think that's really lovely. I think it is an interesting thread, this space of like, well, I wanted to be in the Waldorf school, but then I didn't live near the Waldorf school. And that was a lot of even though I knew I wanted to homeschool before I even had children, it was always like, not always, but after probably the first year, because I remember even though I had a Waldorf background, I went to a Waldorf kindergarten in Germany, but I didn't have a name for it because my mom was a young mom and she just thought, well, this is how people do things. So, I had the festivals were my life. St. Nicholas was my Santa Claus. Like all of that was part of my life. And so for me, when I knew I wanted to homeschool, I started with crazy things like the Bob Jones University curriculum. And I was like, this is not working. This child is not ready for this content. And then I remember like I had taken my daughter she was an infant then, like, that stage when infants are like pulling all the books off the shelf and you're like, oh, put them back on the shelf. Well, I'd taken her with me to the library and I was sitting on the floor in the library just looking through books because I was hungry for something and I couldn't put my finger on what I had had as a child. And she pulled A Child's Seasonal Treasury by Betty Jones off the shelf. And I remember opening it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is my childhood. This is what I want. And so I ran home and I called my mom. I was like, hey, that weird thing that we've always done and you've never been able to put your finger on it? It's called Waldorf. And she was like, oh yeah, you went to a Waldorf kindergarten. And I was like, this is information that would have been great. But from then on, it was so much like, well, at the time I lived in Utah and then I later moved to Idaho. There there was no Waldorf school. So I felt like I had to do it on my own. I had to, but in those years, and you guys probably have done this too, like I was bugging teachers that I knew. Teachers like Eric Fairman was my first, like I had gotten his guides from back then. Remember Bob and Nancy's bookstore, like forever ago. And I'd gotten his guides and I was going through his guides. And then I was like, oh wait, his email is here. And I would just message him. Like I wasn't even thinking about it. Like, and he talked back to me. And so I have this mentorship with teachers. Did you guys have that space, like where you felt like you had teachers that were like listening to you and they were excited to talk to us?
Yeah. When the student is ready, the guru shows.
Totally agree. Totally agree. So I think it's interesting. We all have kind of come to this path in a different way. And we're also like, I think very different as homeschoolers, but also the same as homeschoolers. And I'm thinking that this middle school, high school space that people often get really afraid of, I just want to talk about that. I want to talk about like that because and I'm really hard-headed, so that's part of it. But I was never like, oh no, I'm not going to keep doing this. Once I started, I was just going to keep going. And then, we had moved from when my current husband and I moved to San Diego, people were like, were you going to send your kids to San Diego Waldorf School? And I was like, no, because it's beautiful, but I love being at home with my kids all day. Like I loved that piece of it. And I always think it's odd when somebody says, oh, I don't think I could be with my kids all day. And I'm like, well, that's your fault. You have to fix that. Because if you don't like being around your kids, you get to fix that. You get to fix that relationship.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts about that? Because you guys have both been in like big Waldorf circles in different parts of the country, because Laura is in California and Annie is in North Carolina. I'm down here in cold Florida right now. And like I'm like, I want my Florida back. Um, but like, have you noticed in your circles like parents that are just like nervous about this space or not, thinking, oh no, I tap out, I can't do it anymore?
I mean, for us, we went into these Waldorf experiences, these Waldorf schools, and I didn't think the families were there, were really interested in what Waldorf was. The
Right.
teachers were wonderful,
Mhm.
but a lot of the parents, I was like, this isn't really what I'm looking for.
It
And
feels
so,
like a posh private school to a lot of people.
and I had trained as a Montessori teacher straight out of school, And I had watched schools buy a couple of pieces of equipment and call themselves a Montessori school and charge more money. And so I was like, people were just sending their children there without really understanding what it was. So when we left this Waldorf kindergarten, and I was like, I'm going to homeschool for 1 year. And I had these amazing teachers as mentors, but none of them really, they were supportive, but they didn't really understand the homeschooling side of it.
Right. Because I feel like we kind of started in that time when homeschooling was not accepted. And it's still not accepted by a lot of teachers, but it was totally not accepted by teachers.
No, they didn't get it. And then when we left and people watched my journey, then so many other families were like, actually, I'm going to do this too. So at school, I ended up, inspiring people to leave, which wasn't my intention, and to do it. But with middle school, in Los Angeles, I had this amazing, what I thought was this amazing homeschool community, Waldorf community with 2 or 3 trained Waldorf teachers in it, which was, exactly what I wanted. But as the children got older, they just they weren't interested in what Waldorf brought to the older children. And I had gained the confidence in my homeschooling as I went, where I was like, you know what? This is what I want. And I like all of this. And I'm going to continue on that journey. So I've continued the last couple of years, I guess, without that community in
Right.
person. But with you guys and with amazing mentors along the way,
And I think that's so interesting because I do think there is this strange shift that we spend all this time when they're children to help them be of this world but not worldly, and then all of a sudden they become teenagers and we're like, oh wait, we should just do what the world is doing. We should do all the math that way, do all the science that way, do all the history that way, and expose you to everything, rather than, hey wait, let's go back and look at what Steiner said about this. Let's follow the child for what the child needs instead of what society thinks they need. And I run into that a lot with other people. Well, what are you going to do when you get to high school? I'm like, same thing I'm doing now. Like it's a like I'm going to change the way I'm doing things. No, we're continually looking at the child, what the child needs, and how we can meet them. And I think, like, honestly, it's so beautiful because I think of all three of us and how we have very different children and we're just looking at what they need. Annie, do you want to talk about like how like what your process is as far as how you're looking at what your kids need? Because you're doing a lot of different things. You've got theater going and your kids are thriving.
Yeah, I think just I'm following, the child's lead. And I think there's somewhere, I don't remember what lecture, but Steiner said that all education is self-education. So the children are really teaching themselves, but we're the facilitators and the ushers of helping them. And our job is to really also just really observe the child. And, we've been talking about that lately, about this observing and paying attention. And so I would say that the key really for me is just to pay attention to them. Pay attention, watch what they're doing, watch what they're feeling, see where they are, how they're unfolding. I met just a couple of years ago someone in their early 20s who went all the way through a Waldorf school, a traditional Waldorf school. And she said to me, and this was really helpful to me, she said to me, I felt dragged along, meaning she wishes they had held her back 1 grade, but she didn't know when she was young how to articulate that. So she felt like it was moving too quickly. And so even in the Waldorf curriculum, a child can feel like they're either ahead or behind. And it's really important for the adults to pay attention to where they are, that are they seeming a little older than 8th grade or a little younger? And so, but you have to really pay attention to know that. And I thought, well, as homeschoolers, we don't have to worry about what grade they're in. We can
Right.
see this is the child that's right in front of me. This is where they are now. And then we can use Steiner's lectures and we can gain the information and really work hard to understand the human being and human development, because that's really what Waldorf is really, I mean, really studied child development in college, but it didn't hold a candle to Steiner's
Right.
insights on human development and where they really are and how they really incarnate, and meeting them where they are. And so I always just look at, you know, also there's a little spark, it seems like, at least from my experience, in each child where they kind of lean in this certain direction, and it's just little hints of it, but you have to be an adult that's paying attention. I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, okay. And it comes with temperament, and it comes with everything else in the child, where I'm like, they're leaning this way, I'm here, I'm just going to support. You can kind of see their destiny a little bit. And if you
Yeah.
just put them through a curriculum of any kind, whether it's Waldorf or any other curriculum, you might miss, if you're just so strict to stick to that curriculum, you might miss the child's destiny. And so I
Totally.
still give the traditional curriculum, but I shift it towards where I see that child going based on the knowledge that Steiner gave of seeing the child. And so that can be adapted to anything. And I was talking about this the other day. I get so excited, but you could pull from almost any resource or curriculum and adapt it to that child and bring it in a Waldorf way through your speech and through talking. And yes, anyone can do it. And
Art,
actually, there's no
all of
better person to do it than the parent, because they are
right.
so karmically connected to that child, and they do have to work on that relationship. Otherwise, they're going to have to work on it another time. So it's just, you might
No,
as
I
well.
completely agree. I completely agree. I find it to be, I think, you know, a lot of what we see in more modern psychology, it's very scientific. And Steiner brings that and goes, okay, well, let's, like, if we can go deeper and we're looking at the child's soul and we're looking at their spiritual space, what do your spiritual eyes tell you that your physical eyes aren't going to tell you? And I think that that's what's missing so much. And when we are looking at placement, placement is really important in a Waldorf, and it shouldn't always be super cut and dry. I mean, yeah, we can go by their birthday and we can look at that, but we should also be really looking at the child. And that's, I know that's what they're trying to do in a, you know, Waldorf teacher is trained to, the first grade teacher and the kindergarten teacher are trained to do that space of, but it doesn't always happen. So, you know, I read in oh, I was developing the observant eye. I think that's what it's called. And the woman, the author talks about like, hey, yeah, we're trained to do these things, but here's the deal. The long and short of it is you can charge more for first grade than you can for kindergarten. So we're often pushing these kids through. And the parents are like, oh yes, my child is going on to first grade, rather than, is this a space my child should be in?
Right. And I did have a child that probably should have gone to a second year of kindergarten and was put on to first grade and always felt a little not quite fitting in with her peers. And so when I homeschooled, I was able to slow that down
Right.
and really not have it be about the school but about the child. And so that's the beauty of homeschooling, is we can really literally tailor things to that child. And you can't really do that anywhere unless you just have a teacher that is really like it in tune with every single child in their classroom, which is an
And
amazing.
that's really hard, but they're like 30 to 40 children in a Waldorf classroom often. And that's really hard. And I think about like what I could do as a homeschooler that I couldn't do if my kids were in school. I think about, I have my second son is a March birthday, and he really, really, really could have. And March is like that weird gray space, right? Like it's too bad we don't have September, October, November, December, January babies only, because then it's easy. But like that March space is kind of that weird gray area. And my ex-husband was never going to let me hold him back a year. So I just, because when we're homeschooling, we can look at the curriculum and go, okay, what do you need right now? Oh, I can see that these few blocks, we're going to push those until the fall, and we're going to work with where you are right now. And that is that beauty that we get as a homeschooler, that you don't get in a classroom. And we get to really intimately know these children that other people don't get to know.
Yeah,
And I
this
feel like
this
in that realm, we're also teaching them to know themselves.
yeah, the first year of homeschooling that I did was going to be her second year of kindergarten, and all her friends were moving up to first grade, or the people she seemed to connect with more in her kindergarten class. And that they had really done an assessment, and they said, you know, in terms of her social, she should really do another year of kindergarten. And so it just so happened that that tied in with us moving, and I was able to stay in that. I did first grade very slowly. It was kind of a mixture of first grade and kindergarten. And for the first 4 years, she always started in January. She wasn't ready to go up a grade until then. And so it allowed me that space to be able to do that. And it wasn't until everything shut down and we were doing fifth grade that she really seemed to be able to go into that September starting a new year. But I'm holding that space. If we're not ready, if she's not ready for me to bring something to her, then I don't. I wait.
Right? Isn't that's such a lovely space? It's something that I'm so thankful for as a homeschooler, that we get to sort of choose in this space for them, and you wouldn't get that option any other way. And so I don't see, often people say to me, oh, well, Waldorf seems to hold children back. Actually, I think it really allows children to unfold, and because we'll see this, like, things go slow and then they leap forward, and they go slow a little bit and then they leap forward. And you can't see that if they're in a classroom, at
Right.
least as well.
And I have one child who is kind of seemingly actually ahead in where I'm like, ooh, I think I'm going too slow. We really belong in these blocks that are supposed to be for next year. So then I start weaving together that, and I've had to speed up. So they had to speed up as well as slow down, but that ability to adjust your sails, to adjust your sails in the wind is not something they can do in a school just because they can't, because you'd have to do it for all of them. So
let's talk about, there's something that comes to mind, and people ask me this question often too. So let's just talk for a minute about the nuts and bolts that, you know, people are like, how are you keeping track of everything? And what are you doing about a diploma? And I actually don't worry about any of that stuff because it all takes care of itself. But like, are either of you like doing anything specific? And I know, Laura, are you going to stick, you're with a charter, are you going to stick with the charter through high school, do you think? And I mean, again, very different spaces for all of us.
No, I'm not. She's actually doing a high school class this year, and I had to really look at what it involved and what the curriculum was, and it was nothing that she hadn't already been doing. It's a language, and it wasn't going to be really challenging for her, but it is so dry and it is so boring, and the hoops you have to jump through with a charter school, like, no, there's no way I'm doing it for high school. I am not somebody who wants to jump through hoops for the sake of jumping through hoops. So we'll do
here.
we'll do a PSA for high school. But I fought really hard when I put her into a charter to keep her a grade below. So on paper, she is only in 7th, whereas we are in 8th. And I've given myself that buffer because, if something were to happen or we need to slow down, we can slow down.
No, I think that's amazing because you get to have that space. So that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. What about you, Annie? I mean, you've already graduated, went through. What was your process?
Well, so I brought him the traditional Waldorf blocks when he was in 9th and 10th grade. And I saw that he took a really strong interest in design, graphic design specifically. And, I knew at the Waldorf school, even at the high school he was at, they do allow the high schoolers to use a laptop, or, I guess in 8th grade, they take apart a computer and they put it back together again. And he did that with his 8th grade class at the school. And he's very engineer minded anyway. I noticed that in the younger years, that he's has an engineer brain. And so he loved doing that. And so then in 9th grade at home, he wanted to build his own computer. So he built his own computer from scratch, ordered all the parts off the internet, put them together himself. I did not help him at all. I just watched it in amazement because I wasn't a part of that 8th grade thing, because that was a different teacher. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And so he did that. And then he also then taught himself Adobe, and was doing graphic design. And so I said, well, we're homeschoolers, we can do what we want. So he had made main lesson pages for years on paper with the drawing. I said, okay, you get to make your main lesson pages digitally. So he even did a border and everything, and made all main lesson pages and we did ancient Greece, and he made this beautiful Greek border, but he did it all in his self-taught digital world. And I thought it was really interesting being, Waldorf, where we really slow down tech. And there was a while where he had no screens whatsoever. And then he goes into this screen world, but in a creative way that he was in control of. And I thought that was such a beautiful introduction to screens for him when he was 14. So he did that. And then he did that for several years, and I brought him to local zines to talk to other artists who were doing the same thing so that he could do that. And so he did that for years, and he made our planner that I sell, and he helped me make that because he wanted a project. So I said, okay, I want a project, I need a planner. And I get tired of writing this. I had been writing the planner out by hand with a compass, with circle in my planner. And I was like, I'm kind of tired of doing that every day. Can you please make this digital for me? And he did it for me. And then he did several projects for me, and he worked busily on that. And I also gave him other Waldorf blocks. Later in high school, I brought him the Parsifal like they do, but I brought it in a really living way, like a really real homeschool way instead of a formal way. And then towards the end of high school, he started to get really interested in, of course, you're at the age of driving. He's really interested in cars, and he's engineer oriented. And he met all of these friends who were fixing cars. So he started fixing his own car. He started taking the engine and transmission out in our driveway and putting them back in again. And I was really amazed, but I guess that Waldorf taking apart and putting together helped him.
Right. I have a son like that too. Yeah.
And he had always been into Legos. And so I watched where he was going, and I always gave him support. And I always said, okay, what are his needs right now? And I would design his projects and blocks based on where is he at? What does he need? He's phlegmatic, so I helped him with his temperament. And so I just worked with it that way. And this next child, so it depends on the child. This next child has a completely different path. She's not engineer oriented. She's not into that same path. And now my son is a mechanic, very accomplished, and he's amazing. He's one of the best mechanics probably in the city, because he has a passion for it and a love for it. And that's what Waldorf does, is that we foster this passion for life, this love of learning. And the love of learning is more important than what you're learning. It's that this strong will that we're building. And the next one is interested in theater. So I am signing her up for all kinds of opportunities. She's now going to be assistant. She's been doing theater for several years, but she's now going to be an assistant director for the next production that they're doing. So she gets to experience the other side of that. But yes, I'm bringing her all the normal Waldorf blocks, but I'm leaning in heavily on the theater, and everything is woven around theater. So you can kind of see where they're going. Not all children, though, I will say, you might not know, they might not have chosen something, but you can at least see where they are and just meet them there.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree completely. And I think that's really the space of being a homeschooler through these years, is being able to capitalize on all right, well, this is something you're really interested in. Let's see how far we can take that while still bringing the other pieces, but, giving them that space to be excited about. I remember my older daughter, she became a yoga instructor while she was in high school, and, working through these other spaces that give them skills for later. We don't have to like drill things into them. We have to allow them to unfold and understand and get excited about life, because I think if we don't, they get to that adulthood space and then they're scared. Like, oh no, things have been spoon fed to me this whole time. Now what do I do? You know? And I never wanted them to be in that space. I wanted them to be in the space of like, oh wait, I can make this decision for myself. I can walk this path. I can learn whatever I want. I mean, that's one thing I tell my kids all the time. Listen, if we miss something in the curriculum or otherwise, and there's something you want to learn, guess what? I don't have to be in charge of that. You can go and learn it all on your own. And it doesn't have to be directed by me. And that's what I find so amazing about this love of learning and this. And I don't even think they're conscious of it. You know, they're definitely not when they're early teens. I don't think they're conscious of it, but you start to see them be like, oh, I want to know about that. And then they go and figure it out. They don't need us to pull up the library app and find the books for them. They're like, oh, wait, I already found the books. And they're at the library already for me. So I'd like to go and get them when when you can drive me there. So I feel like it's this different space that we have to, again, step out of that mainstream idea of what a high schooler should look like, because most of us have pretty good relationships with our kids when they're in this space, because we've been fairly open. We've been allowing them to have the space to be with us. And I think let's talk about one other thing. And I don't want to put you guys on the spot, but this was just coming to me. One thing that I find really important is not to bring them social media, too much tech, all of that too early, because then they're getting their opinions from other places rather than forming their own. And that's kind of what I've noticed. And not that we've always been great at it, but I'm thinking, especially with my younger two, we've been trying to be really careful about like, this is the path that we're on, and you're just not ready for that. Because if their mind is, that intellect that's born at 14, it's just like we can't cram everything into it. We have to just let it unfold. Do you guys have any thoughts about that?
Lara, or should I go? Yeah, I mean, we really limiting social media, especially because it is just you're very bombarded by be this, do this. It's very distracting, and then you can't really get into that space of diving really far into your hobby and taking it and see how far you could go. I could have thought maybe in the younger years that I thought, oh, wow, my son's going to be a graphic designer. Well, he handled it in a very engineer oriented way. Well, he wound up doing mechanics instead. So I didn't know, but he was able to find that path by not putting too much weight into, what was coming in from the outside. And there's a lot of fear instilled at this age, especially from the parents. And you'll see Waldorf homeschooling starts dropping off in middle school and high school, and there's less and less people still doing Waldorf. Even ones that went to Waldorf schools, they're maybe not going to the high school, or the numbers drop off. And I think what I've heard most is the reason for that is that a lot of it is the fear from the parents of thinking, I have to get this child ready for college, ready for the world that they're in. And yes, while that's true, they don't realize you can still do that and also relax. They just don't really realize that they don't really know. The parents don't know what their options are. They just hear the fear piece. And what I did for mine was just, this is a lot of work on my part. I mean, I am still resisting it, right? I'm still feeling that fear coming in, and I just block it. I'm like, nope, this is what we're doing. Because I get the question, are you getting them ready for college? Are you, and yes, I might do a thing. My 16-year-old, for example, just did a lot of TAing for theater, which means she was a teacher assistant. So she put in a lot of volunteer hours at the theater. Well, I just simply wrote those down. And then I'm like, well, if she wants to go to college, I wrote the number of hours, you did that down. And then that can be part of your, of when we're applying, or, we take, if it was a really loose block, we can take that and write a transcript, and we could get into a whole conversation about writing transcripts.
Right.
But it just, I think that the fear problem is something that we need to talk about. This fear that's put in that they're not going to do well if they're doing Waldorf in middle school and high school, and it's just simply not true.
Right. I agree. I think they're doing better than their school counterparts, Waldorf school or, high school down the street. Because I think that we're really allowing them to, like, oh, I want to try this, and I want to try, like, because that's what Steiner says. Like, he talks about, I forget which lecture it's in, but he's like, we're not giving them a college level course. We're giving them a taste. Give them a taste of things. And so we should allow that more sanguine nature that a lot of kids have of, like, well, I'd like to try archery and I'd like to try karate and I'd like to, so that they understand, like, what lights their fire, because they might try all those things and be like, I'm gonna move on. Like your son with the design, like, well, that's great. But I'm really feeling pulled to this mechanics piece, and that's like it's a gift that we can give them.
Yeah, and
It's
I
a gift.
allowed that space for, him to pull out the car engine in the driveway and to really just dive into, I don't know that he would have had the time to really dive that deep. And
Right.
also, it's the thing about Waldorf children that is just so amazing. If they're really allowed to do that, that they have this crazy notion that they think they can do anything. Like
I agree.
they
I see that. Yes.
they and my son thinks he can do anything. He literally thinks that and believes it. Like he even says he could switch careers now and do so. It's really because he could do anything, because the will in Waldorf is built really strong,
Right.
because
It's not an entitlement space. It's the will that's been developed of, well, of course. I'm not expecting somebody to hand it to me. I'm going to go and figure this out. No, I think it's lovely. Laura, do you have anything to add?
No, not really, other than I remember reading an article, I don't even know if it was before my daughter was born, about how top colleges were leaving space for Waldorf children because they were so well-rounded. And so that has just held me the whole way through this. I've kind of kept out of it and not kind of delved into it any further, just held that belief that we are raising children who are so well-rounded, and there is a space for that. I don't know, mine at this point isn't showing, she's not heading in one direction. She's still exploring everything, but
She should.
yeah. And I definitely think that when this space allows me to do that, it allows her to try different things. And, one year it might be horse riding, and the next year, at the moment it's dance. And she can do that. And I feel if she decides to go to college, there's going to be a space for her.
Absolutely.
Because they have a confidence. You're not just learning the way we learned, teaching to pass a test. And it's just such a valuable experience that we're giving them.
I completely agree 100%. I remember, so my middle son went to public high school. He moved in with his dad when he was 14, and he went to public high school. And his teachers, and I moved from Utah to San Diego, and his teachers in Utah called me to tell me, thank you for raising a child that is so open-minded and so well-rounded. We don't see that in public school. They called me. I wasn't even his custodial parent at the time. They called me to thank me. And I remember thinking, this path must be going right. Like, we must be doing something right here, because we are bringing them so many amazing pieces within the Waldorf curriculum that it allows them to just go and have that confidence. And it's confidence I wish I had at that age. I mean, as a choleric, I had that confidence, but from a hard-headed space, not from I've learned this space, right? So I feel like we are doing such a service to our children.
Yeah.
Do you guys oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just echoing what you're saying. She's 16, is now just starting to thank me because she realizes, because she's going out in the world with children who were not homeschooled, and or who were homeschooled but not Waldorf, and she's starting to go, wow, she's really seeing how she's like, the way I see the world is so different from how these people I'm interacting with see the world. And she's like, it's kind of, it's so interesting. It's just dawning on her, and she keeps coming to me and saying, thank you for giving me this. She realizes what a gift it is, and feels very thankful, almost to the point of tears, and hugging me and holding me, because it's dawning on her, which it didn't before, of like, wow, you know, and it's only just starting to dawn now at 16. And it depends on the temperament of how, you know, thankful they'll be. But it's confirming that even though we went in a very relaxed way, that wasn't this rush frenzy way that society is doing, I had to trust. I had to let go and trust. And it really takes the adult just saying, I have faith that it'll work out. I have trust. I trust in Steiner. I trusted what he was saying, and it's paying off 1,000-fold.
I agree.
Oh,
1,000%. 1,000%. Well, thank you, ladies. I think that we will go ahead and close it up now. I feel like this is the conversation that I would have with anybody who's stressed about the space. I feel like, you know, we have to have the confidence in ourselves to know that what we're bringing is what they need. And I think if you don't have that confidence and you're listening, you're like, oh no, I don't, read some Steiner. Like, take a breath, read some of those lectures, you know, come to the study group. I mean, I should talk about the study groups too. So we have 2 study groups going. Annie hosts them both, and the first one is on Sundays, and it's an educational study group, and we're studying Steiner's work for children. Right now we're getting ready to read Discussions with Teachers. We just finished the Therapeutic Eye. And you've got a bunch of other great books lined up for us this year. But then we also have an anthroposophical study group on Wednesday nights that is really diving into the anthroposophy pieces. And I think either one of those, if you're somebody who's listening and you're like, I need to know more, I need to understand more, come to one of those study groups. We'll leave the descriptions to both of those and the information for both of those in the show notes so that you can grab those. And I thank you both for being with me today. Appreciate you guys. Thanks so much.
The vision of education has changed. More and more families have seen the benefits of homeschooling and are choosing a different life. Our desire is to bring together qualified teachers with families who are yearning for a Steiner-centered experience. We are a worldwide virtual school. Our goal is to give every child the opportunity to have a true Steiner-centered education at an affordable price, all while allowing families the flexibility to follow their passions. We invite you to attend our question and answer, or send us an email with all your questions, and start envisioning how Seasons of 7 can help your family live their best life.